Elder Okemasquio Ekti Margaret Cardinal, an Indigenous knowledge keeper, was raised in a Northern Plains Cree family which maintained, practiced, and taught the values of traditional Cree culture. Originally, she is from Saddle Lake First Nations in northeastern Alberta. Ekti Margaret is a well-known teepee and tent maker who also teaches her craft when requested for the past 48 years, and the resident cookum at Young Indigenous Women's Circle of Leadership gatherings each year for the past 18 years at the University of Alberta. The Aboriginal Arts and Design program at Northern Lakes College started in 1973, and Ekti Margaret ran this program from 1988 to 2009. Ekti is the longest-serving member of the Regional Environmental Action Committee, REAC, since 1990, including acting as accountant, participating in the Compost Balls program, and advocating for waste separation. Ekti and her partner David live on the shores of Lesser Slave Lake in a solar and wind-powered house off-grid, which they started building in 1992 and continue to finish. Speaking about the beginning of REAC. And I'm really interested to know, how did you get started in your project, being the creation of REAC, and what was your inspiration to get involved?
I've been involved with REAC since approximately 1995. I had a friend who was part of the beginning of REAC in the very early 90s. And I think the reason why I chose to get involved was I was really concerned about how much plastics are being used for and how much waste there is with plastics. Especially living by the lake, one of the things that really bothered me was that we know that plastics don't decompose as fast as one thinks they do. And I live in a serene environment by the lake, and just seeing the garbage that's left behind by campers and then by, the boat people, I call them because they're in boats. Mostly fishermen, and then just because when you look in the environment, one of the things that bothered me was how much waste there was in plastic bags. My husband and I, we always took our bags. I made the bags because I didn't want. The problem was we were getting accumulation of bags, and it just seems. Ooh, what do you do with them after a while? I mean, we can reuse them, but then there's also they go to the garbage, but they don't decompose. Uh, so I think that with REAC, REAC has it's done quite a bit actually in the old days. We encouraged having a separation of garbage. At that time we could we we implemented on encouraging the local town and other towns to supply and collect garbage, and the garbage had to be separated. And so we encouraged. We actually did a lot of work promoting that, so that the plastics can be collected, the cardboard can be collected, the glass can be collected, and then I don't think when it came to composting, we had a friend do these big composting balls. I think we tried to promote that so that people can collect their compost and put it into this ball, and it's all locked in, so it couldn't be opened by bears, and it can stew in there, the compost. And this had nothing to do with meat, because it all has to do with just vegetables, your garden produce, your banana peels, blah blah blah. So we started this getting these balls made, and we got them. I think there's quite a few people who bought them. We have one that we still have where we put our compost in there. And then the whole idea was to teach people about reusing your compost and how you get the compost into the ball and then you let it sit and stew in the summer because you're always feeding it. And then we put it, there's 4 stages. We take the compost from here into the ball. From the ball, it stews, and then we go into emptying it so that it's in that kind of a barrel where the sun reacts to it. And that usually takes a year. It takes 4 years to get it into your garden.
Wow.
So the whole point is to get it into the garden. So that's when I guess it was getting the ball was part of the recycling the plastic, but you still have plastic.
Mm.
So the inspiration was to reuse all the garbage that was, you see it everywhere. It disgusts me to see sometimes plastic hanging on trees and plastic here and plastic there and balloons here. Yeah, that's I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, it sounds like you were definitely you were interested in waste reduction, and seeing all of this waste in the environment and around like inspired you to get involved with REAC.
Mhm.
I'm curious, I know you mentioned that you began doing this in the 1990s, which is really early on in REAC's history. How did that work? Like, were you part of creating the group and figuring out the direction for the group, or
Well,
were
I
you jumping
wasn't
on?
really, I didn't create the group. There was a group of people within the High Prairie district and community got together, and then they were the ones because at the time when I was when I was seeing all this waste and stuff, I thought there's got to a friend introduced me to REAC, and I was actually quite curious about it. And they'd already been in operation 4 years by the time I was interested, and I thought, how I like what they were doing,
Okay.
and yeah, and I like their what is it their there's a term for it. Anyway, I like where they were going, and hence the reason why I got involved. And then my husband got involved a few years later. So
Okay.
within REACT, I've been a member. I've been an accountant. I've done their books. I've helped volunteer. I did a lot of volunteer work, and yeah, it's gone. Let's see. I've been involved in different small events. But mostly I didn't. I I encouraged the young people who were coming on to REACT to just keep going, looking at different ways of letting people know what's there. There is a problem here, right? There's a problem. Even now today, I keep telling people, that plastics, you're wearing plastics. In fact, we're a certain percent plastics because we're breathing it in. We're eating it. Yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges with plastics, and what made you realize these challenges exist?
Well, it's how much plastics have taken over our lives. You know, it bothers me that well, this is going to sound weird, but we're not as pure as we used to be. From 19, I'm going to say the way I look at it is from 19 um 80s, it's plastics have gone crazy. And I started noticing it in 1960s where things like when we used to have toys, there were wooden toys, and then all of a sudden it's plastic. And I thought, well, that was okay. But not knowing that plastics were going to take over the world. Um, and then realizing how plastics they've taken over. They've just, whether it's through, because anything with poly is plastic, polyester fabric, even the toys, the bags, everything. Um, the sad part is what it's doing to our environment. And I think I realize now that it has a lot to do with where it originated from, obviously, and it originated by the oil industry. And the oil, well, oil creates plastic. It's a big business. And I don't know how to fix that because we've all kind of turned into oil. Sorta, you know what I mean? Micro, we either eat it, it's in our system, we drink it, because the little products, even it's in the air, we breathe it in, and I thought, oh my God, it's scary to think what's going to happen in the future. We're not going to be totally human anymore. We're going to be, we're morphing into something, and I don't know whether that should be accepted or not. And it seems like most people are accepting that rather than being the genuine people you're supposed to be. And
Mhm.
I hate to think what it's going to be like in the future.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a problem that's still growing.
Yeah.
Um, we have kind of a big question, but I'm curious about your thoughts on what should we do with plastic that is already made, already in production, already existing?
That's a big question. I know we do the recycling, reusing, um, I saw programs where they're actually collecting it and making bricks and buildings. We're doing, but it's still, um, we produced so much in this last 30 years. It's astounding how much plastic we produced, because now when you look at buildings, you look everywhere, everything you can see is made out of plastic. Your table, your computer, um, um, the things that you use, everything is plastic. And I don't know, it just scares me, that uh, uh, I'm an Indigenous person, and I worry that we have lost touch with Earth. We have lost touch with ourselves because this plastic has gotten us. I know that with our, um, I used to hear comments from elders about how this in the future, they say in the seventh generation where we are now, this big snake is coming, and that big snake is actually oil product. Yeah,
Hmm.
and you can
Yeah,
see what it's doing. God,
yeah.
I sound like I'm what do you call the end of Earth doomsday?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's hard not to get so down
No,
about it, because you're
yeah.
right. Like it's everywhere, and it's like it's such a big problem. It feels like.
And every day we just accept it. We accept everything. And we don't a lot of people don't give a hoot. They just accept this is what the way it is.
Yeah,
I mean
yeah. You get used to it.
yeah. And we go ahead and buy our polyester sweaters and our plastic clogs and our phones and our whatever, because it's
Mhm.
just people say, "Oh, get with the technology." I know, but we're losing ourselves. That's where I'm at.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For our next question, again, you've kind of already mentioned this. I feel like you're on the same track as me so much. Because the next question is, what are your thoughts on microplastics?
Oh, I'm not happy about that. I'm not.
Yeah.
You know, um, I don't know how you can prevent that because it's everywhere. Like, every time you drink water, if the water is had been through plastic, well, of course, it's going to pick up little fibers. It's
Hmm.
in everything. It's in if you do art, it's in the paint, polymer. That's poly again. It's plastic. It's your hair ties are plastic. Everything is plastic. You know. Um, I think we have. I don't know how to fix the problem other than use less, reuse. You know. pass on, give it to somebody else. They can pass it on so that we don't have to create more of that product. Just
Mhm.
so eventually it will die, because really micro, it's when you go through, there's this place that I drive through, and that you probably know where it is up north, where they actually burn tires.
Mm.
And then, I mean, yeah, it's all rubber, but it's also has plastic in it. And that plastic is coming out of the chimneys and it's in the air. And then there's also all I think there's about 35, 40 big industrial things that's happening east of Edmonton.
Mm, mhm.
And that stuff rises to the air. And then if the wind is strong enough, it actually lands 100 to 300 miles further east. And who's breathing all that? The people who are living in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm really worried about microplastics.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big challenge for
It's a
sure.
big challenge. Yeah. And I don't know how you can harness or contain it.
Yeah. Yeah, and
I
that's the
mean, you
struggle,
can
right?
put filters, but you can only put so many filters.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, our next question is, in your perspective, what is the most important message for the public about plastics?
How harmful it is, and that you take your life in your own hands.
Mhm.
You know, are you willing, like, you can only do what you can do by eliminating a lot of consumerism, buy less, reuse, avoid. I was blown away I went to a mall, and there was one store there that had sold nothing but widgets, or whatever you call them. They're just kind of things you play with, and it's all totally plastic. And the whole store was selling. I thought, oh my God, they should not allow people to do that. And what do the people do with those widgets after that? They're in a dump. The dump goes in a waste. That there should be a law to control how much junk is being produced. And they shouldn't even allow those big stores from the south from coming in, because they sell garbage.
Yeah.
Buy cheap, you get cheap, and you get garbage.
Yeah, we've been talking about that in some of my classes of trying to face our consumerist demons.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, just overconsumption for sure.
yeah.
And speaking of consumption, in our role as consumers, we often feel overwhelmed when trying to reduce our plastic use. Can you offer any suggestions?
Well, like I said, carry your own bags, make your own bags, for one. Um, and then ask yourself before you buy anything, do I really need this?
Yeah.
And the other question was, how can I reuse this? If I bought something, what's the end result? You don't want to just throw it in the whole idea is not to have it in the garbage. Have somebody reuse it or repurpose it, whatever. Um, Otherwise, don't buy it.
Mm-hmm.
I think people have too much stuff you don't need. You don't need stuff to be happy, but then some people need stuff just to be mentally happy, but that's not right. You need,
Mm-hmm.
you don't, you just need enough to survive. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we feel that way, that we need more. But like you said, like internally at the end of the day, you can get by with a lot less than you think you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When COVID hit, I think that was, in a way, a blessing in disguise, because it really, it was interesting to see how the air has cleared a lot, or did clear a lot. Um, People didn't go out to buy stuff, and I mean, plastics is big business, and big we have to avoid big business because they're big polluters. We're encouraging that by buying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for our last question on here, we were wondering, how do you want to move forward while facing the challenges of plastics? And what is a challenge or a barrier you face in moving forward?
Well, I don't want to be a preacher, but I want to let people know that, if you realize this is harming you, and if it's not you, it'll harm your children. You got to think of the future, you know. Um, and like I say, just be wise with what you purchase, what you use, um, and think ahead rather than just buying something frivolously that you'll just do once and toss away, because then you're guilty of those plastics and that. Yeah, the plastics you see in the ocean, you see the plastic in the garbage. It's just appalling how much garbage we produce as humans.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say this. Before Europeans moved into Canada, we didn't have this issue. Mind you, we didn't have oil, but then we were not greedy about that. In fact, the whole idea was to leave no trace.
Mm-hmm.
No, you lived on the land. If you took a crap, at least it'll be covered, or animals eat it. It's because you had natural fibers, and then even the hides they disintegrated because you don't want to leave. You want this to be always healthy, but then we got into that mode of want, and I think we're at this stage now that people are now wondering, hey, you went from here of having no plastics, and then all of a sudden want, and then it just got bigger, bigger, bigger. Something's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Something
Yeah.
will happen that will. I'm hoping people will just wake up. They don't. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Um,
how am I going to change that? I don't know. No, I don't know.
it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge. Yeah.
You do as much as you can because it always starts from here, right? It starts from you. It's you have to do as much as you can to change it so that you show by example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you so much for those points.
Yeah.
That is the last question I have here that are written out, but I actually did have a couple more questions for you just
Okay.
after our conversation, if that's all right. Whereabouts do you live? Where's your community?
Um, where I live is in Joussard. It's along the lake in Lesser Slave Lake. It's
Okay.
about 80 kilometers west of Lesser Slave Lake, the town of Lesser Slave Lake. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm originally from Saddle Lake, which is east of Edmonton, and that's where they get all the pollutants from, all those big, because I worry about that, because all this big brown cloud kind of hovers and settles in our area. Yeah,
Right. Okay.
yeah, and we can have whiffs of whatever company is polluting the air. They think that it just disappears, but it doesn't. It settles somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you think that as an Indigenous person and in your Lesser Slave Lake community, that has changed how you view plastics pollution and how you think about the problem? Because I know you mentioned that a little bit about, you know, like it makes you feel sad to see that we're so distanced from the land now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm just curious about that.
Well, when I first moved to um, Joussard, um, and that would have been in the early 80s, 70s, late 70s. Um, the land was just it was wild. It was really nice. It was just beautiful, and most of the people, the indigenous people on each side, because there's two reserves. There's Sucker Creek and Drift Pile. It was so nice. It just really changed really, really changed late 80s, early 90s. It has changed a lot. And I noticed um, because where I live, I can walk in a bush still and go do my prayer, and it's nice, but it's really disheartening when you go past and then there's a big sand pit there and you find garbage. And that's what got me going, is seeing the garbage that people dump in the middle of nowhere, whether it be old paints, wood, Chesterfields, and just no concept of how much harm they do to the environment, you know, and then plastics and garbage and bottles. And you can keep picking all that, but you'd think people would know, but no, there's just yeah, um I don't know where we lost our respect for the environment,
Mm.
but
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
it's base it's the trees are I like going for my walks because the trees are giving me um, good energy.
Mhm.
Do my prayer there, have the birds there, but it just um, that consumerism has taken over because I know people were more into that before. Now they just need and want everything. It's just sad.
Mm. Mhm. Right. So you've noticed a change in your
Need
community.
I notice a big change. I grew up with horses. I lived on reserve in Saddle Lake. We had horses. The first car I saw was when I was about 4 or 5, and I just couldn't believe how noisy and smelly it was. I didn't even know it was a car. My mom had to point it out to me because it caused these. Um, the first time when we lived out in the bush, I was telling her one day I didn't sleep very well, and I said because I could see these lights in the on the leaves outside the window, and she came over the next night and she sat with me until the light showed up, and she said, "Oh, I know what those are," and she walked me to the gravel road, and there was this big monster of a vehicle coming. I didn't know it was a vehicle, but boy, it was noisy. It had rubber tires and it smelled. And that's to me was that's modern coming. That's the beginning, you know.
Mm.
And I plastics came, I would say late 60s, 70s. You know, the big change was 1969 when power came in. Electrical power came into the reserve, and people had TV, and it changed everything. Because I grew up traditionally, my siblings who were 13, 15 years younger than me, they grew up on TV and want. Yep.
Mm. Mhm.
It's amazing how much power TV has. Remember as a
Yeah.
kid, you were watching TV and then you'd watch like Walt Disney or something, and then their commercials would come on and they
Yeah.
want you to buy what they've got.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
amazing how
And do you
much power.
notice some of that now in your community, in the Slave Lake area, where you see some of those things with the way that kids are learning about the world, and do you think it changes how they, they want more things, or they have a different relationship with nature, or
Yeah, they're mostly have a relationship with their this is my adding machine. They're just you know what I mean? They don't even they've lost contact. They're just into this, or parents give them this or an iPad or whatever. There's a
Mhm.
connection, and it extends to plastics again, hard plastics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think, when you think about that, and it represents a loss, right, of,
Yeah.
a loss of connection. What do you think might be a way to bring some of that back for people?
Well, um,
It's a big
it,
question.
it's a hard question to answer, but most people who get sick with cancer, because I think cancer has a lot to do with plastics. I think they kind of wake up and it's a little too late by the time they're very sick. But at the early stages is you have to go back to nature. You got to go um, do what you can to get back into whether you drive to the mountains, but be on your own. Go back to nature if you can. That's just one way. That's a short fix. Um, but do anything to keep the environment as pure as you can, because we're slowly losing it. We're losing it by all the tailing spawn. It's disgusting what's happening up there, and also the digging, the mining of in southern Alberta. It's just it's heartbreaking when you hear about all of this, and yet people consumerism they have the power, and I don't know how you take that power away. Other than them getting sick, they're creating their own illness. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a
pretty
really
heavy, eh?
it's heavy.
Yeah,
But no, yeah, I think that's a great point though about like, there's so much that we can't control, but at least we can try to like form those connections for ourselves and take that time to go out and be outside and be present, be with
yeah,
nature. So I think that's great advice. Thank you for sharing
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think on that note, I'm going to end our recording here. Thank you again so much for your time, Ekte. I really appreciate
Well,
hearing
I
your
hope
thoughts.
that helps you.
Yeah.